Right, so what we're going to move on to now is getting some drums down. We've obviously got our progression there and the pads. But before we get to set on those, I think getting the drums down so you kind of get the groove of the track is pretty important. If you get too stuck into one element without the other ones in play, you can end up down a rabbit hole and you can't get out. And hopefully we haven't done that. So
Yeah, I mean, we would, like, although we obviously want to structure, like, how we're making this tune, normally it's a bit more sporadic. Like, you'll do, like, a little bit of, like, melody stuff and then a bit of drum stuff, and, like, you kind of switch between because, every time you add a new element, that might give you an idea for, like, how to change something you've already done, or... Yeah, so we will try not to bounce around too much, but, I think in order for us to actually make a track we like, we might need to bounce around a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a few sounds that hopefully we'll make some decent drums out of, and I think a good place to start is the shaker loop. So I think with our shakers, we'll just play this one in the background, we tend to use quite a lot of source sounds that aren't drum and bass loops and stuff, particularly slower ones from, I don't know, soul tracks or soul sample packs and whatever. You can find so much stuff on Splice nowadays. And that gives you a lot more control of how you want to shape that shaker. If it's speeding it up to 172 BPM in this case, you get a lot more flexibility in terms of how you want those transients to behave. Whereas if you've got a drum and bass loop straight out the bat, obviously you can't have that much flexibility with how you kind of process that shaker. So we'll start with this one, and it'll automatically warp to the tempo probably. And straight away it's set itself to 220 BPM, so when we're playing it, it's playing out slower than the original sample, so we'll just half that BPM, so essentially Ableton thinks it's 110 BPM, and when we play it back this time it's going to sound faster, bit like a Gabba tune. And you can kind of hear here you've got like the offbeat shaker playing here, you can see it in the waveform. And with drum and bass, that sounds a bit weird, to be honest. The offbeat hi-hat is obviously very much a house and techno kind of groove, but in drum and bass, especially at 170 whatever BPM, sounds a bit mental. So we'll just shift this over like half a beat, and that kind of open hi-hat shaker tambourine sound is now on the beat. And what we'll do is just take, say, these first two bars, and we'll just give it...
Duplicate them over.
Yeah, we'll just process this one first. We'll just basically give it a bit of a quantize. And then in Ableton, you can control the transients within the waveform. So where the warp mode is set to beats, have it set to preserve transients, and you can set it to this. I'm not exactly sure what the name of it is, but essentially you can shorten each transient. So as an extreme example, that's very tight, but obviously we take quite a lot of the tail out, which is essentially the character of the sound, so we'll just maybe dial it in at, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's almost like controls how much audio plays in between each transient.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So we can maybe even go tighter, to be fair. Let's go like 40. It's quite hot as well, turn it down a bit. So this is what we've done just in the short two steps, and this is the original sample. And you see what we've done there. We've ended up with quite a lot of control as to how it actually sounds. It sounds pretty tight. It's got a nice groove to it, so we'll take that as our starting point. So let's just loop that up, and we'll set a group up of our drums to keep track of things. Get rid of the old sample. And we'll call that our shaker loop. And we'll just initially, let's stick a little EQ on it, just to duck out any high end going on there.
Yeah, so it kind of goes without saying, I'm sure most people will know this, but we just tend to low cut every sound that's not a bass sound, essentially. And it's good practice to do that as you go along, because like frequencies that are very like insignificant on singular sounds over time will build up. So if you've got 70 channels, or like let's say 40 channels of stuff that isn't a bass sound, and they've all got low frequencies at very low levels, like very low dB levels in there, those 40 will essentially stack and create some problems further down the line in the mix. So yeah, just sticking low cuts on almost everything is good practice.
Yeah, definitely. maybe we'll stick a bit of reverb on the shaker as well, just to give it a space. And within Ableton 11, I think we're on 11, are we?
Yeah.
I forget how many Abletons are out now. They've got a new hybrid reverb, which is a cross between convolution reverb, and it's got some sort of like Hall algorithm in there as well. And within the drum section, you've got this gated ambience preset, which you use quite a lot, which just sounds really nice. We'll dial it back quite a lot. Obviously 100% wet, bit too extreme, so we'll dial it back. What do you reckon there?
Yes.
20%?
Sounds
Obviously
good.
this is pure trial and error. Sometimes it will sound good, sometimes it will sound bad. So that's a decent little shaker loop we got there. We've also got this hat loop, which is just from a again a sample source. Relatively nice sounding hat. If you open it up, this first section here sounds quite nice. There's quite a lot of variation and movement to that. So first of all, we'll just quantize it again, get it all hitting where we want to hit. And let's have a listen to this first bar playing by itself. So that's not too bad. Maybe we'll just duck this one in over here somewhere. Why not? And then just take this one back at the end. My bad. And let's have a listen to this as a loop. So it's just giving us a nice bit of drive. We'll take the volume down a bit as well. And that sounds, again, quite nice. As I said earlier, we've taken that from just like any old sample pack, but we've gone for a sound that's a bit different to a kind of digital sounding hi-hat from a drum machine or something, just to give a bit more interest to the listener and bring it back to that, again, organic. I hate to use that word, but it's called an organic hat. There you go. Kind of does the job, really. And we might as well just take that same EQ from the shaker, stick it on the hi-hat, and let's run those two together from over here. Maybe we'll just, again, take the transient down a bit. And it sounds like there's a weird stereo image to this hi-hat. Yeah, it's panned slightly to the right. Sometimes with samples they do have strange stereo.
Yeah, especially when they've been actually recorded out as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if we mono it, we're getting a few phase issues, so maybe we'll leave it as stereo. That sounds okay. Yeah, in this utility plugin, it's got a width feature, which is quite nice actually. Just take the width down very slightly. That sounds okay. I mean, these obviously aren't going to be the main elements of the drums necessarily. That's going to sit in the background, but we do want to get it sounding pretty tight. Potentially, we should take the shaker even tighter.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's bring this hat down a bit as well. Okay, that's okay for now. And just so we don't get too far in without losing sense of the drum and bassness of this track, let's get a kick in there. So with our kick, snares, anything like that, where we're using single shots, we use Ableton's drum rack. Don't know why.
Just habit, I think.
Habit, yeah. Other producers use audio clips within Ableton, but we find that you have quite a lot of control within the drum rack over how you are, essentially designing your sound. So you've got just a very basic kick here, which will drag in. Now this is again from a kind of house and techno sample pack, so when you play it you can hear there's quite a lot of tail on there, which isn't great.
Yeah, I guess with slower tempo music, you can afford to have longer tails and stuff, because obviously there's more space in between each hit, if that makes sense. But with drum and bass, because it's so fast, it would sound, basically from a kind of mix point of view, if you have really long tail kicks and subs happening at the same time, it would be a mess. Yeah,
it'll get in the way for sure. So in Ableton, what you can do is take the snap feature off within the one-shot mode, and with the envelope here, with the fade in and fade out knobs, you can sort of shape that kick to sound pretty nice. So just initially, something like that will probably do. And we'll load up our MIDI. So Control Shift M as the shortcut, we'll load in a 2-bar MIDI clip there, and what we like to do with our drums as well is make sure there's a kind of nice groove to it. Now, it's sometimes quite a hard thing to quantify, but the groove is essentially how the drums feel when you listen to them. If everything's really straight and on the beat, it sounds a bit rigid, but you can kind of introduce what's called swing into that MIDI groove, which makes things very, very slightly off grid and gives it a more kind of natural, flowy feeling.
Oh, you don't want to say the word organic?
Oh yeah, true. Actually, sorry. Nice and organic. This tune is going to be called Organic. We'll tell Rich to spit some bars about being organic.
Yeah.
So in your MIDI clip in Ableton, down here there's this groove section, and essentially if you press this little reload button, you get a lot of different groove options, and yeah, there's a lot, to be honest. You've got grooves extracted from the MPC sampler, you've got the SP1200 ones as well, some from Logic, and you've got the Ableton own ones. This is one we've used previously, so hence it's highlighted here. 54% swing on 16th, so we'll just load that in. If you go to quite a high swing percentage, it sounds a bit scatty, and because this music is so fast, it sounds a bit of a mess, to be honest. So anything above 60%, 70%, unless your whole track is on that same swing setting, it sounds a bit weird. So yeah, I mean, feel free to experiment with this, but yeah, anything around 60% or less is usually going to sound pretty good, to be honest. And yeah, let's just program a basic kick pattern in, really. So obviously a classic two-step, you've got the kick on the 1, and then on the, what do you call that? Has that got a name?
I don't know.
The 2.5, the 3.3 as Ableton calls it. So that's a classic drum and bass pattern there. And what we'll do instead of looping this is have it so it carries on that groove for like a 2-bar pattern. So instead of restarting this here, we'll just have this kick here and then one here. I mean, you've probably heard that on millions of tracks before, but it works well. It just sometimes sounds a bit more natural than having just this one.
It's a bit more interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you can get a bit funky with this. You can, I don't know, stick an extra one in here.
Yeah, it might be a bit chaotic with all the other drum sounds. Maybe take it out for now, but yeah, as an example, you could stick that in.
Yeah, for sure. And if we had that in, we'll solo it a second and say we loaded an extreme swing. Here we go. I mean, it's hard to tell without anything else, but there you go. That was 71%, and that sounded quite rushed and quite scatty. So the 54%, a bit more natural. But yeah, as John says, we'll leave that out for now. Maybe as the tune progresses, we'll add in and remove different elements of the kick just to keep things interesting. And we'll duplicate that over the 4 bars. And if you play that back, there's still quite a long tail to that. So and that's all you really want out of a kick. Anything too long and elaborate is going to get in the way. And again, we'll just get an EQ out and let's do some very generic shaping. So just a low cut, really kind of steep shelf. Anything around 30 is probably fine. You can go even higher if you want sometimes.
Yeah, so obviously with kicks, that's like one element that naturally should have bass in the sound. So really what we're doing is just cutting things off below 30 because the human ear doesn't really hear that anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously the kick and sub relationship will be important further down the line, but we'll talk about how you can kind of get around that.
And then what we'll do, just to make sure, again, we're being safe, stick a utility on there, and we'll make this sound mono. And what we'll also do is put a little bit of Ableton Saturator on there. Obviously we've got a bit of gain there, so we'll duck it off slightly, and that just gives a bit of extra bite to the sound, really. And we don't want anything too extreme there. Obviously you can go pretty hard style, but we don't want that.
There's the gamma kick.
So yeah, it's sounding alright, to be honest, just as a basic kick, really. And what we'll do with this as well is add another kick layer on, which is slightly more organic sounding. Oh man, that's cringy. Let me just find it. So we've got this layer here, top kick, which is just, again, it's a recording of a real kick drum, and we'll just duplicate this whole MIDI channel onto this drum rack here, where we've just loaded that sound. And initially, this might sound a bit clashy, so we'll just quieten this down quite a lot. And again, with the EQ, this one we're going to take out all that low end, just so there's no interference with that top kick. And we don't always do this, but sometimes it just sounds quite nice. And we'll just tighten up a little bit as well.
Maybe take us a little bit of the attack out as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
See that first bit of transient, yeah, a little bit clashy with the body of the kick. Maybe a slightly more gentle fade out. I mean, that sounds fine for now. So that just helps, yeah, the kick sit nicely on top of those shakers. Yeah, that's a pretty good starting point. And now let's get stuck in with a bit of a snare. So with our snares, we tend to use a few different sources. We tend to use kind of, I don't know, can't think of a better name than like a characterful snare. So it's not like a straight up impactful Serum programmed snare, but it's something that's got quite a nice tone to it, or edge to it. You know, it's got some, again, more natural sounding frequencies in there.
Yeah, I think if we were writing more, obviously all drum and bass music is dance, it's club, mainly club orientated music, but I think if we were writing more like kind of harder styles of drum and bass, I think we probably would lean more towards synthesized transients, so you can have that kind of real precision over it. Because our music's, I'm gonna use the word now, it's a bit more organic and a bit more, it's a bit deeper. Yeah, you can kind of get a bit more interesting sounds out of samples that you reuse. So our drums are all like 99% of the time sample based,
Yeah,
as opposed to
definitely.
synthesized.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we've got two kind of snares here which we'll use as a source. So both kind of woody sounding, kind of natural, and we'll load them in onto the same drum rack for now. So we've got our first one here, which will again shorten up with the Ableton envelope within drum rack, and we'll just make sure that there's no silence at the start of the sample. There we go. So if you have silence at the start of the sample when it triggers, obviously it's not going to be exactly on point. So let's just see what this sounds like by itself. So we'll just get a loop going. Again, just on the 2 and the 4 every bar, and we'll duplicate that up over the 4 bars. So at the moment that sounds a bit crap. So we'll duplicate it up a little bit. Sorry, pitch it up a little bit with this transposition knob again within the drum rack.
Yeah, so basically each drum pad has a sampler on it. So you can get this sample without the drum pad. This is called Simpler.
So
we play the whole drum group so we can hear it in context.
So obviously this is just a layer, so it sounds a bit shit at the moment, but that feels like it's hitting in roughly the right zone that we want to. Obviously it's not processed or anything, so it sounds a bit odd, but it's hitting in roughly the right place. So let's just bring in our second snare. We'll just duplicate this up here. Again, we'll make sure there's no silence at the start. Maybe just duck off a bit of that. We'll solo it within the drum rack and just loop it round a bit. So again, this is just more of the same, really. A nice sounding layer, potentially too long. We'll shorten it up a bit. A bit more pitch action as well.
Play it with the other snare.
Maybe we'll turn this one down a little bit. We'll just call this snare 1, and that's probably a relatively good starting point just for a snare layer, I guess. And again, we'll duck out any low end that we don't need, probably to about there.
Bit of a spike in there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. So we've got, obviously in FabFilter on the Spectrum is pretty good, and we can see there's quite a lot of activity going down here. That might be a transient
blue
as well.
filters as well. There's a massive spike in there too.
So we'll just duck out this little peak there. Just to keep things a bit sensible. That's an okay layer, to be honest, nothing special. And then what we'll do is add a clap in. So we use claps quite a lot again in our snares. Just gives a nice fizzy top end, and a lot of claps can be quite experimental as well, and gives you nice textures over the top of your sounds. So we've just got a where is it?
It's not in there.
It'll be somewhere.
Snare transient. Which one's that?
Wait.
Whoa.
Where is it? So yeah, what we'll do now is add in a bit of a clap layer. They give a nice texture, an overtone to your snares, and quite often they have interesting frequencies and textures in there, but just give a bit more of a nice feel to your sound. So we've got this as a bit of a source. It's a bit trappy, to be honest, but we'll deal with that, and we'll just have it playing the same as our snare MIDI. We'll pitch up a little bit, and again we'll bring in our
play in context.
Bring in our envelope. So yeah, you can hear there's quite a lot of silence at the start of that sample as well. Tighten up a little bit. Needs to come down a bit in volume.
Yeah, I guess an alternative to using a clap would be like a white noise, like a white noise burst or something as well.
Yeah, definitely.
People do that as well.
So just as a nice layer, that's okay. It's a little bit straight sometimes. You get a bit fruity. Stick a chorus on there. Why not? Sometimes it sounds good. Just spread the sound out a bit. Makes it a bit less in your face. That's okay, to be honest. But what we'll add in as well is just a final little like snare transient, basically, which is just going to give a bit of a punch to the snare. And for this, sometimes you do use like essentially neurofunk snares, which sound ridiculous when you play it by itself. There you go, really aggy. But actually, the start of that sound will just take the start of that sound, basically.
So yeah, although we said we don't use synthesized drums per se, we essentially do in sample form.
Yeah. So we'll just duck that out of there. And let's just group these snares together. So that's way too loud. Pitch up a little bit. We'll just call that snare. And then on our group, we can process this a little bit more. And quite often we use a bit of, again, EQ. Stick an EQ on the snare group. Again, take out that stuff down here that we don't want, which sounds okay. And then quite often we'll use a bit of a transient shaper as well. And for this, we do tend to use the NI Transient Master as well. And you can mess around with the attack and the sustain. So we're just essentially controlling how much of the initial punch we want coming through and how much of the sustain we want to remain as well. So all the way down, it's super short. You can increase it, but it sounds whack. We'll just duck it down maybe a little bit.
And yeah, there is a little bit of phasing going on here, but we can sort that out. Later. I guess the key thing is with this, like I said, there is some phasing which we will address, but not getting too bogged down in the technicals at this point, I think, is always a good mindset to have. Just keep things moving creatively.
Yeah, for sure. What might help, just quickly, is mono in. That sounds okay. Maybe we'll just do this. So, as an initial kind of start, I see what it sounds like. For now, that'll probably do. We'll get to some further processing of that later on, but as a starting point, that's okay.
Yeah, we'll cover the processing as a separate bit.
So what we'll do just finally is add a bit of shuffle in there, I think. So with drum and bass, the classic shuffle in between the kick and the snare gives it a nice kind of flow and groove, really. And you can do that using various techniques, really. And we've just got this raw drum loop here. Obviously, that sounds a bit bad by itself, but what we'll do is just stick it in there, and we'll try and extract some of the shuffle from this, and integrate it into our sound. So the good shuffle's probably around about here. Oh, cut too much out there.
Can repitch it as well.
Yeah, so if you open the audio file itself, in the in the algorithm setting here, the warp algorithm setting, you've got repitch, which means for every essentially BPM you increase from the original source tempo.
Just playing back faster. It's essentially like playing if you've ever played a record on a vinyl player, and when you increase the pitch, it
gets faster.
When you increase the pitch, when you increase the speed, the pitch also increases.
Got there in the end.
Got there in the end.
So that little shuffle here is probably what we want to extract. Let's just move this over here. We'll just loop up this one bar here just so we get an idea of what's going on. We'll duck out the snare from the original sample, and then the kick and snare here. We don't want that. We just want to be left with this bit here. And we'll play it in context. It'll probably sound crap initially. Yep, so we need to quantize that. And again, we'll apply the same groove as we've got on our kick at this point too. And we can probably consolidate that in Ableton, which essentially makes it its own new audio file. And again, we can maybe shorten the transients a little bit, make it a bit more snappy. Probably leave it as original pitch. It sounds a bit raw still, so perhaps we'll just put some saturation EQing on there. And there's a crazy hi-hat popping off in the left, so we'll deal with that. Duck out any frequencies that you think are causing problems. So straight away when you put the fab filter on there, you can see spikes. So yeah, around the 1-2K marks, probably some nice frequencies that we can bring out there as well. Sounds alright. We'll shorten that up a bit more maybe. Oh, what did I do then? That sounds okay, and then we'll just take this same section and we'll duplicate that over the next bar as well, because if you remember from the kick MIDI pattern, we've got that sort of looping phrase for about 2 bars. So what you can just do is duplicate like this, I think, and you roughly get the same pattern repeating over and over again. That is not what you do.
You need to highlight the whole from bar 65.
There you go, that's it.
There you go. There we go.
There you go. And then we can bring this again, same section in here. And that sounds a bit rigid by itself. But what we'll do is bring another accompanying shuffle in there just to kind of, basically sauce it up a little bit. I think we've got a sample in here, which is a classic shuffle. Again, it's just pretty aggressive shuffle sample that we can probably use just to girth up, I guess. Girth up? What a terrible word. Just to girth up the that organic. Oh, use that same word again. Organic. Drum sample we've got there. So I'll listen to that. So this one obviously needs to mimic what we've already got there. So we just duplicate that over. It's a little bit spiky, this one. So we'll just, maybe take out a couple of those high frequencies.
Maybe even, maybe a little compression on that.
Yeah. We'll just use Ableton stock compressor just to control it a little bit. We've got a click at the end there as well, so we'll just make sure we chop the end off. Maybe from the start as well, so we wouldn't chop that off. Right, let's see what that sounds like in context. So at the moment that sounds okay. Doesn't sound incredible. It sounds a bit raw and unprocessed, but that's where the beauty of Ableton comes to show itself. And we shall pause. Okay.